All right. Now it is 1 o'clock in the morning where I am. I gave a short notice. That's okay. I just wanted to slide in here late night and make this video. And I want to frame this video around Wikipedia and how overtly racist Wikipedia is really controlled by racists. Everybody knows that. And I want to give people another example if they have not seen it already. Now, listen, I appreciate the work that a lot of people do out here, specifically Tariq, but he's not that, like, he doesn't have time to get into detail when it comes to history. You know, he just points stuff out and he moves on because he's trying to make a point. But we need to get into this because Wikipedia needs to be put on blast for behavior like this. Everybody needs to be aware of what they're doing and how they're trying to erase our history. Now, if you go to the Wikipedia page for the Olmecs, what you're going to see is overt racism. In my opinion, I think it's overt. They put it right there in your face. Now, I'll show you why. This is their page on the Olmecs. And if you scroll down, you see one Olmec head here. Not only is it small, but it happens to be mutilated. Now, let's be clear. Most of the Olmec heads are not destroyed. They're not mutilated. And the Olmec heads are the prominent discoveries of the Olmec civilization. By far. They were just discovered in like 1939, something like that, 1938. Recent discoveries. But here you have one. As soon as you scroll down, you have one. Now, this is a tactic of these racists. Because as you can see, it's small, it's only one, and it's mutilated. You keep scrolling, and then what do you see? You see these fake artifacts. This one, I believe, is without question art forgery. This one down here. But keep in mind, they tried to only use the less Negroid looking artifacts. And they had to have gone out of their way to do this. Here's some more. Look at it. Look at the Olmec artifacts that they chose to display on their profile. Look at them. This is a statue of a person. Okay? Look at this. This is what they chose to put on display to show people artifacts, to give people an idea what the Olmecs may have looked like. This is what they chose. Look at that. They had to have been bent over backwards and gone out of their way. They had to specifically pick and choose. These artifacts are really like needles in a haystack. And they had to be highly selective to choose these artifacts. Look at this one. Here's another one. Look at that. This is deliberate. Here's another one. Finally, they have one more Olmec head. Look how far away it is. Everything else is close to the camera. You notice that, right? It's deliberate. Now, to show you how deliberate this is, and keep in mind, just because some of the faces don't look traditionally like African people or black people, black people, doesn't mean that black people didn't create them. Like I showed before, if you look at several sculptures in Africa, they don't look like the people. You know, a lot of these racists, they like to point out, they like to say, hey, look, these sculptures don't look like black people. Okay, does that look like a black person to you? This looked like one of the artifacts they would love to put on display, because they don't look so much like a Negro. These people in charge of Wikipedia, they handpick the artifacts that look the least Negroid. They do the exact same things in museums. Off the top, we've heard stories of them hiding the Negroid-looking artifacts in the basement, and nobody's allowed to see them. Here's another one. These are African sculptures. Sharp, pointy nose. They don't always look like the people. A lot of times, their artifacts are abstract. But there are some sculptures that reflect the true identity of the typical person, of the typical tribal member. Okay, typical phenotype. Now, this is why I say this is so racist, because when you Google Olmec heads, first of all, the Olmec heads are the most prominent discoveries of the Olmecs, the most jarring, the most baffling. And you have several to choose from that are intact. And they just happen to choose the ones that are mutilated, have the lips knocked off. For Wikipedia, they chose this one right here. Not only did they choose that one, they made sure it was far away. They made sure that it wasn't a close-up. I know how these racists think. I grew up with them. 44 years. I know these people. And all they do is they looked at these heads and they said, look, these things look too Negroid. These things look too much like Negroes. No, we cannot have these Negro-looking faces dominate our Wikipedia page profile of the Olmecs. So they looked at all these doggone heads and said, no, 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 no. And they had to say no a lot of times. They had to reject a lot of faces. Many of the Olmec heads, the photos were taken immediately after their discovery, while the heads were literally still in the ground. They would take a picture as soon as they discovered it and started to unbury it. These are incredible, the most jarring photos available. And Wikipedia refused to have these photos on the Wikipedia page because they look too Negroid. Here's another one. Most of those heads, when they discovered them, The heads were lying face up, face towards the sky. These were incredible, mind-boggling discoveries that the Wikipedia page refused to show. Instead, they had to bend over backwards because they're such a bunch of sick, twisted racists. They had to bend over backwards to select all of these artifacts so that this profile on the Olmecs wouldn't look so black. It wouldn't be full of a bunch of photos of Negro looking sculptures. Pathetic. And we all know that they do this all the time. This is rife in Egypt as well. Heard about these British museums and stuff where they put certain artifacts in the basement. Oh, you're not allowed to see those. Some of the archaeologists discover them, and then they find out that they're hiding all the Negroid looking faces. Oh, we can't put that on display. Always important to highlight Wikipedia racism. Now let's go back to my PowerPoint. Like I said, those heads were discovered in 1938. Now, why is that significant? It is because they were discovered after a campaign of lies, an attempt to cover up true history. Right? Keep in mind that really took place in the 1800s, where these scholars were trying to whitewash black history all over the planet. And especially so here in the United States. So when they discovered these heads, the so-called scholars of today, of mainstream, they said, oh no, we have to give these things a recent date. You know, look at the date. They're saying 1200 to 400 BC, 1200 BC. How would they know that? They don't know how old these things are. But you got to keep in mind, the modern academic world really grew out of the Bible. During the Renaissance era, during the Enlightenment era, they used the Bible to base history on. They based history on the timeline of the Bible. And that is still with us today. That's exactly why they refuse to place the history of Egypt beyond 4000 BC. You ever notice that? For years. And many times right now, they try to say that the Egyptian history, the history of the Egyptians, does not go beyond 4000 BCE. It's because they tried to fit the entire history of the world into the past 6,000 years. So the same thing had to be done with the Olmec civilization. They dare not say that these civilizations are tens of thousands of years old. But there have been scholars outside of the influence of these deranged, racist historians, and who've already spilled the beans, who've already made their own discoveries. I shared one here already. I'll share it again. You Google this. This was reported in 1999 in the Japan Times. Japan Times. Skull alters theory on colonialization of Americas. Rediscovered in Brazilian museum. Now keep in mind, a lot of those Brazilians down south, when they discovered these Olmec heads, they did not react the way these deranged, racist scholars reacted. They went ahead and said, these are a bunch of Negroes. These are Negro artifacts. We know what Negro artifacts look like. We've seen several Negro artifacts all across Africa. We know what Negro artifacts look like. We know what our own cultural artifacts look like, and these ain't it. These belong to a bunch of Negroes. And you had them, they already spilled the beans. And that's why you have this conflict. When you look at the Wikipedia profile, those scholars, or on Wikipedia, they talk about how it's not generally accepted by mainstream academic. All they're saying is that, hey, our racist white scholars are not saying that this is true, so we're not going to say that it's true. They're being selective. They're only listening to the reports of their own racist white scholars. The people who follow these traditions, I mean, in the 1870s, the late 1800s, they were being overt and deliberate about erasing black history because they were bending over backwards to project black people as inferior with scientific racism. That's the height of scientific racism. And later on, all of these sciences were proven to be lies. But anyway, in the Japan Times, they talk about how they found a skull of an African woman. And they have dated it 11,500 years ago. They're saying that she lived in the United States. Is that right? Wait a minute. Human fossils from the Americas. It's the Americas. I don't know, was it the United States? Somewhere in the Americas. Now, people first immigrated in the Americas to the warm area. You know, Mexico, South America. They didn't first migrate to United States. They didn't come up here to northern U.S. until after they were invaded, just like with other civilizations. They would migrate north, some would migrate south. They didn't bring all those black people over on those ships. Look at all these black people. All these black people in South America and United States. We only, 200 years removed from when they were supposedly importing black people from Africa. And there are no ships left. You know how many ships and voyages it would have taken to bring all these black people over here? I mean, 200 years is not that long. One person might live to be 80, 90 years old. So you're only talking about the lifespan of 3-4 people. You telling me all these millions and millions of black people were brought over here? None of them would. I don't buy that for 1 minute. And they are finding that out bit by bit. And like I said, this was dated 11,500 years ago. That's far beyond the 15 or 1200 BCE that they give it. Now, some sources say 16 BCE, but that's not far enough. That's not far enough. That's only like 3,000, 3,500 years. No. Black people been on this continent way longer than that. Again, on their Wikipedia page, why didn't they include these sculptures? That's not it. You know, it's not just the Olmec heads that they strategically avoided. They had to duck and dive and dodge a whole slew of Olmec artifacts. And they ducked and dodged them because they looked too Negroid. Like, look, man, we can't put all these big Negro faces with their big Negro noses and Negro lips. We can't put these people up on our Wikipedia page. So let's find the most Euro-looking artifacts we can possibly find, and let's flood it. We'll put one Olmec head up there, but yeah, make sure the lip is broken off, and make sure it's far away from the camera. You know, we don't want Negroid appearance leaping off of the page at the viewers. That's all that was. But they had to strategically avoid these artifacts. They even avoided artifacts that didn't look like people, but they still looked too Negroid. Yeah, it looked too much like a Negro. So nah, we're not gonna put that on. We see you, Wikipedia. We see you. Now, if there were people over here 11,500 years ago, that's a long time. 11,500 years ago. That really means that we don't know how long people been over here. And like I said, it wouldn't make sense for there to not be black people over here, because there were black people everywhere else on the planet at that time and far beyond. I went over it already in previous live streams. You can do your own research. Google the Andaman Islands, the Sentinelese people, the Australians, the Fiji, people of Fiji, the earliest inhabitants were all these black people that they say have been there for some 40, 50, 60, 75,000 years. Just Google it. The original people of Fiji, the Australian people, the original people there, the Sentinelese, the people of the Andaman Islands. Google it. And Google how long those people have been there. They're going to say like what? 50,000, 55,000, 60, 75,000 years these people been over there. And you have to sail in a flipping boat to get there, man. You got to make sense when you're talking about history. So what were they doing sailing over there? Why was people that long ago? That's a long time ago, man. When you talk about 55,000 years, we can't even fathom what the world was like back then. You see what I'm saying? So we can't even figure out why they were sailing over there. For what purpose? How did they get there? And why were they sailing out there? What they sail out there for? Just to migrate somewhere? Listen, typically you don't do that. People don't do that. People don't just migrate just to be migrating. Because that is a form of travel. It's not a form of travel. It is travel. And today, when you want to travel the world, what do? You, first of all, better make sure you got resources. It requires a ton of resources. You got to make sure you got food, shelter. Where you going to live? Where you going to sleep? Where you going to sleep? You better bring some type of shelter. You better bring food, weapons, shelter. You might run into some crazy animals. Primitive people don't leave a mighty river like the Nile River. Okay, human beings started along the Nile River. Primitive people who have found a rich river like that, they're not going to leave it unless they are very wealthy. Unless they have an abundance of resources and they can afford to make voyages like that. They can afford to say, hey, let's just go in that direction and keep going and see what we find. For someone to even say like something like that, people would look at them like, what are you talking about? You can go. I ain't going nowhere. I'm not leaving this river, this producing all this food. We don't know when we're going to find another river. We don't know if another river out there somewhere. You crazy. I ain't going nowhere. Maybe I'll go with you if I develop some type of ingenious way of travel and I got a whole bunch of money and a whole bunch of resources. So it tells me that these people are in these different parts of the world and they've been there tens of thousands of years because that long ago there was a whole different world. There were empires. There were rich rulers and people. And they can afford to make voyages like that. And if they are sailing way out here in these islands, and they were sailing all across the ocean, there are islands that stretch from Asia to Western United States. There are islands everywhere all throughout there. And these people were sailing from island to island, island to island. Primitive people who are short on food, they're going to stay wherever the food is. And if they're on the Nile River producing all that food, why would they start walking in the desert just to do it? They traveled and made those journeys because they were rich. They did it at a time when they were extremely powerful and had a lot of resources. And the only empire capable of pulling off a stunt like that was the Egyptian Empire. They sailed all across the globe. That's why they literally found a bunch of boats, ships in Egypt. How is it you can find a whole bunch of boats and ships in an old civilization like that, but you can't find no ships just from a less than 200 years ago, and there was supposed to have been some 40,000 ships used to sail all these millions of black people over here to the Western Hemisphere, and we can't find none of those ships, but we can find some 50,000-year-old ships over in Egypt. This is because we were already over here. Nobody brought us here from no Africa. You know how much manpower and effort that would take? A lot of people still seem to think that it's a big deal, that it's impossible for blacks to have already been here in the Western Hemisphere. Don't nothing else make sense. Like I said, it's hard to believe that they wasn't over here. And they migrated here from Egypt. I'm not the only one to say this. A lot of, scholars have said this as well because the similarities are too strong. Now, like I said, you got these people out here all out in these islands. The mainstream scholars have said these people been here tens of thousands of years, out in some islands. But they don't want to talk about how they got there. How'd they get there? Okay, they sailed out there. Why would they sail out there if they primitive people? That's not something primitive people do. It makes no sense. So when they came over here to the United States, they found black people here, just like they found them everywhere else they went. And just like they went everywhere else, like they traveled to India and Asia as well. Indonesia, those ancient civilizations there, they built those civilizations as well. They got pyramids out there, aligned just like the Egyptian pyramids with the stars, Orion's belt, just like the pyramids in the Americas that are aligned with Orion's belt. And like I said before, do you really think it's a coincidence that a bunch of people who never seen each other before in 3 different parts of the world, Asia, North Africa, and America, you think it's a coincidence they just happen to all build pyramids and align the pyramids with Orion's belt? If you think that's a coincidence, I'd love to hear why and how. I'd love for you to break that down for all of us. I don't think it's possible. That's clear evidence that these people came from the same place. And they went into those parts of the world with that knowledge, with that skill of pyramid building, tomb building, building homes. With the Olmecs, they had writing. They used hieroglyphs. They had a phonetic alphabet. They were literate. Just do your research on them. Do your research on the Olmecs. They're considered the mother civilization in the Western Hemisphere. But a lot of people like to leave the Olmecs out. They only want to talk about the Incas, Mayas, and the Aztecs, because they know the Olmecs were a bunch of Negroes. Right? So it would not make sense for this to be a deserted area of the world. When blacks came over here, people, it had to have been tens of thousands of years ago. Eons ago. Just like they went to different parts of the world all over the place tens of thousands of years ago. They came here long ago. And they were here by themselves for a long time. Nobody else was over here until the Indians came across from the north. And they migrated. And when they got down to Olmec civilization, they eventually pushed the Olmecs out of that part of the world. And the original Olmec people would then migrate south, and others would migrate north and set up shop in southern United States and in the Caribbean islands. That is exactly why the Olmec civilization was deserted by the original inhabitants, just like Egypt was deserted by the original inhabitants. Angkor Wat in Asia, deserted by the original inhabitants because they were pushed out by the foreigners. And that's why there are a bunch of black people over here in the Western Hemisphere, because they were here. They've been here. We've been here. I don't think there's any other way to explain history. There's no other way to explain what we're looking at right now. You're not going to tell me y'all ain't got no ships from bringing all these millions and billions of black people over here. We talking about not just just look at the United States. Look how many flipping black people in the United States. I don't care what nobody say. Black people do not make up no 12% of this country. I've been city to city. I've researched the demographics in every city in the United States, been researching it for decades. And every city, for the most part, especially every large city, got well over 12% black people. And if you go to those cities, it looked like black people make up way more than 12%. And most of the people in the United States live in large cities, not the country. There's a whole slew of black people here in the United States. And you telling me only 3% of the people that were brought from Africa came to the United States? And you telling me there are millions and millions more in South America, Mexico, the Caribbean islands, and y'all brought all of them over here, huh? Y'all brought all of us over here from Africa, huh? If y'all could afford to bring this many people over here, you wouldn't need to bring us over here. Hell, you would have to be rich before you would even do something like that. You would have to have a megalith of resources, shipbuilders, the food, everything. You wouldn't need to. Like, why would we do that when we got it made here right now? So, when those early European colonists came to the United States, they tried to colonize the United States without the native black people's help. And that's why they failed. They failed when they tried to colonize this land without the assistance of the original inhabitants. They ended up starving, ended up eating each other, committing cannibalism. And they did not succeed until they used their guns to force the native people to help them survive, to help teach them how to till the soil over here. Why do you think so many of the slaves knew this land so well? You've heard stories about captives running away into the swamps, and they know the land, they know the area. Why do you think that is? Because they were already here. Black people were already here in abundance. If they brought over any black people from Africa, it was minimal. It was very minimal. Most of the people were already here. Now, I pointed out this man, right? And let's give him some screen time. What was his name? Ricardo Ventura Santos. And look at what he said. He said there were human beings on the continent long before Asian immigration. Long before Asian immigration. He said Negroes were here long before Asians were here. When he say Asians, talking about these red Indians. But yet the whole world looks at the red Indians as the original people of the Americas. That's the deceptive part. You know, it's a shame we got to correct history like this. Here's some more Olmec artifacts. Look exactly like a bunch of different African artifacts in Africa, but because they look less Negroid, these types of photos would make their way on Wikipedia's profile. 11,500 years ago, and this is Ricardo Ventura Santos, right? Shout out to this man. You got a lot of white and Mexican scholars who just spilled the beans. You know, you have a lot of people like that. They're not influenced by these racists. They're only influenced by the truth. And they're going to spill it out because they're true to their discipline as being a historian, a scholar, anthropologist, whatever they are. Right? So these heads, like I've said before, look incredibly old. And I believe all these artifacts that they found over here, like I said before, is proof that black people been over here for just as long as they've been in other parts of the world, just as long as they've been in Australia, been over here just as long as they've been in the Sentinel Islands, in the Andaman Islands. In fact, I think these artifacts prove that they've been over here, we've been over here longer than those people have been over there. They say the Sentinelese have been in the Sentinel Islands 55,000 years. I believe we've been here in the United States longer than that. Longer than 55,000 years. They have found an undeniable amount of evidence that proves people had to have been here for a hell of a long time. How are we letting these people get away with dating this only to 1600 BCE? That's criminal. That's criminal. Not only did they say they wanted to put it within the time frame of the Bible, you see, when they gave the Olmec civilization its date of 1600 BCE, they were staying true to the Renaissance era, to the Enlightenment era, where the Bible was used as a history book. With the Gutenberg Bible, the rule was that anything that you put a date on, you better make sure it's after 4000 BCE. And we sat back and allowed these people to put a very recent date on civilizations that are clearly older than civilizations that they say is 55,000 years old. The evidence that you see in the Americas of occupation suggests that people have been here longer than they have been in the Sentinel Islands, which is 55,000, the Andaman Islands, up to something like 75,000 years. They've been here even longer. They don't even have any remnants of their civilizations in those different places. And of course, you're not going to find this kind of information in Wikipedia. The Olmecs were literate. Now, if you do your research on the Olmecs, they're going to say that the Olmecs were the first people over here. You know, at least they admit that, right? They're going to tell you that the Olmecs were here before anybody else. Okay, well, the first people who get over here, wouldn't you expect them to be primitive? Wouldn't you expect humans to become more advanced and educated as time went on? After the first people arrived? We're talking about primitive people, right? Who are rocks, using rocks and spears, and they sail over here in their little boat. But the first people over here in the United States, in the Americas, they were literate. And they knew how to build megalithic monuments, statues. This is one of the smaller heads. They had all this advanced knowledge when they got here. They had to have brought it from somewhere else. Where could that be? The Olmecs used hieroglyphs. They had different forms of writing. And they found these glyphs all over the place. They clearly had to have come here with this knowledge. Where did they bring it from? They brought it from Egypt. One of the rules with that I've seen patterns in history is that deities, certain deities, they are associated with the land area. They're associated with that part of the world. So when people left Egypt, they created new deities. Like I pointed out, Isis, Horus, these are deities associated with the Nile River. So you can't leave the Nile River, go to some other part of the world, and still call on Isis and Horus and all the Egyptian deities. No, you got to create new deities. Because in their mind, there was a new spirit in different parts of the world. There's different spirits. And these people were literate. And that's a dead giveaway from this sheet. A dead giveaway that they migrated here from an advanced civilization. Wherever they came from was advanced. And it is in that area that they learned how to do all this stuff. Carve all these monuments. And they had to brought a whole bunch of food. A whole bunch of food. Okay? And you got to be very suspicious of the dates that they give all civilizations, because they pretty much lie about all of them. Egypt is well over 10,000 years. Egypt is, I would say, over 100,000 years old. 100,000 years old. The evidence there is too mind-boggling. It's too mind-boggling. I'm not hearing nothing about no 4,500 BC. These people are a bunch of liars. Again, keep in mind when they gave the date to, I think it was Joseph Harlevy, coming out the University of Chicago, when they were giving the dates, putting the dates on Egypt. This was a time when they were trying their hardest to whitewash Egypt. This was a time when they were committed to putting the entire world history within the past 6,000 years. This was a crime. Y'all have to understand this. An academic crime. And it was fueled by racism. That's why I say these racists are the sickest, most destructive people this planet has ever seen. Ever. Right? What was this? This is from Wikipedia. See how they say? Pre-Olmec cultures, they give us this recent date, 2500 BCE. They always make it after 4000 BCE. And it's all lies. Understand that it's all lies. And this is from the Wikipedia page too. And notice how they formulate the page. Down here where it says alternative origin speculations, they're talking about the people who believe the Olmecs were black. And notice they bent over backwards to keep faces and artifacts like this from that Wikipedia page. A big argument with the Olmec heads is that, hey, you can't go by looks alone. Suddenly, all of a sudden, they don't know what a Negro looked like. Now, when they're looking for a black person to harass, stop and frisk, to pull over, suddenly they know what a Negro looked like. They know what a Negro looked like then. They looking for a black person to gun down or something, to discriminate. They know what a Negro looked like then. But when it comes to some achievement, some major historical, all of a sudden, you can't say they're black. You can't go by looks alone. Okay. The problem with that these people have is that many of the Olmec heads don't have a helmet on. That's a big, big problem for the racists. They know it. Some of them don't have a helmet. And like I said, a lot of these Hispanics down there, they just went ahead and was honest. This sculpture right here is in a museum down there, South America. And they named this sculpture El Negro. They named this sculpture El Negro. It's a Olmec head that does not have a helmet on. And it's not the only Olmec head that was carved without a helmet. And what you see is a flipping afro. They made sculptures with the afros. Sculptures with afros. Now, here's where black people are the experts. I don't want to hear nothing from your little racist white historians. A lot of you flooding my channel, you've been attracted to those Greek videos I did. Listen, what I'm about to talk about now, you're not the expert in. We are. I don't care what you think about that. Let's get that straight. We're talking about afros. Keep your mouth shut. So we know an afro when we see one. Matter of fact, we know our face when we see them. And you know, another thing they say, oh, well, black people are not the only people with big lips and big noses. And you might find a Mexican here or there with a wide nose and full lips. But that's not the dominant phenotype of Mexican people. It wouldn't make sense. You only see that with Mexican people and other people every now and then, here and there. They're like an anomaly. So why would you make all of your flipping Olmec heads to reflect a tiny percentage of your population? And in general, their noses don't get quite as wide as what you see on these Olmec heads. These Olmec heads are strikingly Negroid. Blatantly Negroid. And that's exactly why Wikipedia said, nope, we're not flooding our Wikipedia page with these old Negro faces. And these are the most incredible photos, because they took photos before they excavated the heads out the hole they found them in. Oh no, those lips are too big. Man, that nose is wide and flaring and too wide. No, we're not going to do that. You also see this is another African tradition. Came straight out of Africa, the elongating of their ears. That came straight from Africa. Yes, we came from Africa. But we came from Africa a hell of a long time ago, man. So long ago that we can't be considered Africans no more. We're Americans. We are the true Americans. Just like the Sentinelese people are the true Sentinelese people. Nobody argue with that. The Andaman people are the true Andaman people. No, nobody dispute that. Don't call them no African Sentinelese, no African Andaman, no African Australian. So don't call us no African American. We Americans. African lineage, African DNA. American by culture, American period. So that doesn't work. Racist. A lot of little racist Mexicans too. Oh, well, yeah, there's some Mexicans look like... Stop. Stop. You'd be lucky to find a Mexican face. And I've seen them here and there. But they're hard to come across. You, like I said, you're not going to make all of your faces, and the most prominent faces, these big old statues, to reflect a tiny percentage of your population. Yeah, even though many of these heads are sitting right in front of museums. Why wouldn't you put that on your Wikipedia page? Why wouldn't you put this on your Wikipedia page? From Carlos Cuervo Marquez, said several isolated but concordant facts permit the conjecture that before the formation and development of the three great ethnographic groups, a part of America was occupied by the Negroid type. Okay, why wouldn't they put this on here? He was an ethnologist, botanist, military general, historian. He said the Negro type is seen in the most ancient Mexican sculpture. It is to this race belongs the most ancient skeletons, distinct from the red American race, the red Indian, which have been found from Bolivia to Mexico. It is likely, we repeat, America was a Negro continent. See? This is bad for the sick, racist historians that the Wikipedia based their Wikipedia page on. Right? Shout out to this gentleman and everybody else willing to tell the truth. Everybody else who's being true to history as a historian. When I was a kid, I learned in history class, I was real small, that Ferdinand Magellan was the first European to sail around the planet. It didn't bother me. I was fascinated. Everything I heard about history, it was all about white people. It didn't bother me. I'm like, okay, it is what it is. But with other people, it seems like it bothers them. With these racist people, these white supremacists, it seems like it bothers them. These are the most insecure people you ever want to meet. So I say the root of racism is really insecurity. These are some of the most insecure little dweebs, little weenie, insecure dweebs you ever want to meet in your life. This is confidence right here. For this Mexican man to say this is a display of confidence and security in what his people have accomplished or hasn't accomplished. Because history is about reporting what actually happened, not about giving people some fake, made up history fueled by your sick racism. These are unbelievable discoveries. Could you imagine finding one of these heads buried in the mud, in the sand like this? But the problem is, it's a big Negro face with nostrils. I mean, this man, now you don't see no Mexican with no damn nostrils like this. If this is the most Negro looking face, I'm not even going to debate about that. I'm not debating with none of y'all. Come over here talk about, you can't go by looks. Shut up. Shut up. I'm done. I'm tired of dealing with you sick, deranged, goofy people. Shut your stupid mouth. Right? We came here a hell of a long time ago. It was eons ago. We've been over here in the Americas forever, man. Forever. We came here directly from Egypt. We sailed as an Egyptian colony. That's why black people in America seem to be so fascinated with Egypt. I've had people on this channel tell me that they just like when I talk about Egypt. Black people forever have had this fascination with Egypt. And that might be in their DNA. Might be because that's where they originally came from. But that was eons ago. And we built a whole different culture here, apart from Egypt, that I think we need to appreciate more. The Olmec civilization is our civilization. Just like in every other part of the world, Angkor Wat, Egypt, the original people fled, and they fled in all different directions. Here in the Americas, the original blacks in South America, okay, the original blacks in this part of the Americas went south into South America when they were invaded by the foreigners, and some of them went north. That's why you found black people mixed in with the Red Indians. Because when the Indians came over here, they set up shop in the Americas. They would set up shop in the Americas, in Mexico. Right? But that was long after black people had already been here for eons. Just like these other historians have said. I'm not making stuff up. Right? I'm forming an argument based on evidence. You see, these racists, they feel like they have, like, only they are qualified to tell history. And what they say is the only thing that matters. And what they say is the truth. Even in the Mayan codexes, many of you seen the Mayan codexes that were left by the Indian type, the Red Indians, because those Red Indians migrated down into the black areas. And they were trained and taught by the Olmecs, just like the Egyptians, just like the people in Angkor Wat taught these foreigners. They trained them, they accepted them, they embraced them, welcomed them, and gave them knowledge, shared their knowledge. Black people have been doing this all throughout history. That's what brought them to the United States. They were in business with the Moors, getting a bunch of knowledge and information working with the Moors. Those Red Indian people left images of the original black people in their Mayan codexes. And you look at them and it's clear that they are depicting Negroes. They're depicting Negroes. And they just happen to have traditional black hairstyles in the codexes. Maybe it's a coincidence. Huh? Maybe it's a coincidence. And maybe not. Maybe it's a coincidence, maybe not. Okay? I don't see too many people around the world with hairstyles where it's just two big fat braids braided to the front. But hey, you know, and what is this? Now you look at this image here. And then down there in Mexico, they have these little festivals where they want to wear blackface. Now, who are they trying to imitate with blackface? You know, the blackface that was here in the United States, where white people would dress up in blackface. Now, I don't know what other people get out of doing that. It's just something that seemed fun to them. You know, you don't see black people in whiteface. I've never met a black person who even thought about painting themselves white and looking like a white person for fun, for kicks. It's always been a weird thing with me. I've never understood. Like when I reflect on blackface here in America, I'm not enraged by it. It doesn't upset me. It creeps me out. It creeps me because it's weird. You know? I look at it, I'm like, okay, you I think these people need help. It was just it's weird. I don't see anything funny about that, about pretending to be other people. But that's clearly what they're doing down there, down south. They do this in Europe today. I think over in the Netherlands. They'll dress up like this. Okay, well, who are they trying to imitate? Or they trying to imitate the Negroes they saw when they first came here. Just like here in America. Once they started living around a bunch of Negroes, they just say, hey, let's paint ourselves black and pretend to be black for fun, because it's funny. They wasn't doing this in Europe when they were only living with white people. They only end up doing stuff like this when they've lived around black people. Notice that? So these red Indians were here living with black people. And eventually they pushed these black people out of their home territory. And that's how we ended up here in the United States. We have been here. We did not come here no 500 years ago. People need to cut that out. Only talking about our history like it go back some 500 years. The majority, the vast majority of black people over here were already here. They got lineage to go back tens of thousands of years right here on this land. Until they show me some ships. I don't want to hear none of this nonsense about them not having no ships. When you got civilizations over 10,000 years old who still got their ships, still got their boats. I don't want to hear nothing about, oh, well, they all sank. They all sank to the bottom of the ocean and we can't find them. But as recent as the 1800s, we had tens of thousands of ships and we brought a whole bunch of black people over from Africa. You're not really from America. We brought you here from Africa. Stop it. Stop it. This is a new era. We are peeling back the layers of lies that have been laid out by these lunatics, these so-called scholars in prominent positions. We are able to do our own research today, and the truth is coming out. For me, this is the true history of foundational black Americans, period. Somebody said the Olmec, the Toltec, Aztec, Maya, Inca were black, correct? Now, I don't know about that. I don't know about the Aztec, Mayan, Inca. At one point, there's a lot of evidence that the Mayan, Inca, Aztec, these were these Indian people from Asia. They were the first non-blacks to migrate over here, these Asians. And I believe that those Asians were the Aztecs. Because you see, the Aztecs, the Mayans, the Incans, the Toltec, they did not build none of these structures. They didn't carve none of these heads. They didn't build none of these pyramids. All that stuff was built by the Olmecs. All of it. The literacy, the knowledge of mathematics, being literate, was all the Olmecs. So these other groups, they didn't contribute nothing anyway. They learned from the Olmecs. If you studied history, they had to live near the Olmecs in order to be advanced. Yeah, those dark, a lot of them were dark. coming over here, because there was like those Indian people that came over here. But we over here, we not no Indian. We ain't no Indian type. We Afro black folk. Straight up black. We ain't no dark skinned Indian. And we, the straight up Afro black, we came here eons ago, man. Eons ago. And they picked up everything from us down there in the Olmec civilization. You look up the Incas, Aztec, their little civilization was close to the Olmecs. And the closer they lived to the Olmecs, the more advanced they were. Just like with Egypt. The civilizations that were not black or not African, the closer they lived to Egypt, the more advanced they were. You see it with Greece, ancient Greece, right? They're right across the river. Rome. And the further you got away from Egypt, the more primitive you were. Just like they were up in England. They were far more primitive. The Greeks had to come up there and civilize them in Northern Europe. And that is how it's supposed to be, because you're dealing with old people. People that's been on the planet for an extremely long time. It's simple, basic history. You got a group of organisms that have been on this planet for a very long time, so they had more time to do stuff. More time to build and figure stuff out and do things. Okay, a new group of people show up, okay, rather than go through that same process of taking years and years to develop. Hey, why don't we just make friends with these people who've been here forever, who know how to make boats, who know how to read, who know how to do all these things and build all these things. Let's just, make friends with them and learn how to do it ourselves and make our own version of what they have. They did that with ancient Greece. And listen, they built ancient Greece around the year 800. Around, I would say, no further than around the year 600, 700. That civilization does not stretch into the BC era, ancient Greece. None of those monuments stretch that far back in time. But they did the same thing. They said, hey, let's just learn from these people. They got such a huge head start. It won't make no sense for us not to. And you have a whole lot of evidence of them doing exactly that. Learning and as much as they could by force, by way of invasion from the Egyptians. Now, the Egyptians were not welcoming them into their universities. They had to force their way into Egypt to get that knowledge and that know-how. Force them people, just like the Moors were working with them, helping them to develop their lands. But yeah, I don't know about them Incans and Mayans. Yeah, Van Sertima said we've been in Americas for over 100,000 years, and some folks say they can't even find a date that blacks was just always here. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And it's the same way, all across the world. And I say over 100,000 years as well, because Egypt is over that civilization is too old to date. They can't date. They know that many of them have said it. It's not possible to date it. And there ain't nothing surprising about it. This is an old planet. This is an old planet, man. And there's a good chance that shortly after this planet was created, humans were on it. We could have very well been on this planet millions of years, man. We have been on this planet millions of years. They found human remains that are millions of years old. But because they're small in stature, they want to claim that these are the remains of half monkeys or half apes. That's a lie. Long ago, everybody was just smaller. Just like with the pygmies. Not the pygmies. The dwarfs. Are they pygmies? They're not pygmies. those small people of Uganda? What's the name of those people? Why am I forgetting the name of these people? They're like small people. They're not dwarfs. They're not midgets. They're just small people. Everything is properly proportioned, right? Long ago, everybody was small like that. And those small people, they migrated to all parts of the world. It was back then that they are believed to have migrated everywhere. The Irish talk about seeing those little small black people up there. That's where they got the leprechaun idea of the leprechauns from. Them little Negroes they found up there in Ireland. Those little small people went all across the planet. Now, how long ago you think that is? So, the Twa, thank you, sir. I'm sorry. The Batwa is the full name, but they generally they call them the Twa people. The Batwa. They're around Uganda and a few other countries over there in Africa. Small people, but they're well proportioned. They're just like small human beings. So they found some of those remains. Then they want to say that this is a half ape, half monkey, because they just don't want to say these Negroes been on this planet for millions of years. And that's the scary part, because if we've been on this planet millions of years like this, then it suggests to me that the world today is the way it is by design. It's by design, and some people designed it that way. It could not have been by chance. Could not have been by chance. We'll get into that on a different live stream. Big shout out to everybody who's able to join me for this brief live stream. I had to put some attention on racist Wikipedia and sort of sum up the series that I've been doing here. And that is all for this live stream, and I hope to see you all on the next.